Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to CHM. My name's, yes, thank you. Welcome to tonight's program. I'm Dan Lewin. I'm the CEO of the museum. I'm very excited about our program tonight. Thank you for coming, and special thanks to our members and those who are online and streaming. If you're interested, please consider joining. These programs come to you live and at no charge, and so we appreciate our sponsorship from our corporate sponsors, our trustees, our staff, and our member group. So thank you all for your support. At CHM, our goal is to decode technology, its computing past, the digital present, and the future impact on humanity. And tonight we've got a very special program that falls in line with the thematic that we have going for this time of year, which is about art and creativity and technology. And we got a very, very special program tonight associated with one of the most fundamental elements and what we all get to play with every day, and that's called the pixel. And so we're going to talk a lot about light and the implications of light, and Marguerite Gong-Hancock, who runs the programming, and our Exponential Center is going to introduce the program tonight. So again, thanks for coming. There we go, close enough.
Thanks, Daniel. Well, I'm so happy to add my warm welcome to each of you, and what's really exciting is to see who's here tonight to learn about this. The museum is dedicated to education and thinking about how each of us can be more informed to make better decisions about how technology can benefit us or organizations or society, and just having a chance to talk with some of you in the audience. Saw people that have been involved with computer graphics in the Valley for more than 50 years. And I think our people who are working at Pixar today, and maybe our youngest audience member might be 7.5, which is pretty amazing. So this lifelong learning is a part of what we do. We're so glad you're here as part of our public education event. Paintings to Toy Story. And as Daniel mentioned, it's part of our Tech and Creativity series that we're going to be pursuing this whole coming year. And as part of that, I want to make sure that you know that we have 2 special exhibitions that have opened recently. One is in our studio. You have a chance to play with AI, and through our partnerships with NVIDIA and Microsoft and OpenAI, you can see how AI with some makers or artists is being used to do some realistic imaging or answer questions, and some other interactive things that are happening there. And in our screening room, we have early computer films, and you can see how some of the pioneering artists were experimenting with computers and art in early films dating back to the 1960s. So tonight we're really going to focus on how something as small as a pixel could have such a huge impact in so many areas of our lives and through human expression. So drawing on decades of work in computer graphics, including inventing some of the key concepts that are still used today, our featured speaker is going to share some of his insights, some of his stories, and some new pictures that have been prepared to share with you tonight to open our eyes on how the pixel, or what he calls digital light, has transformed business, art, entertainment, and really how we see and think about our lives. So continuing our CHM tradition, I'm going to introduce our speaker using 5 numbers. 100 billion, current Moore's law factor. 80 million, the number of polygons per frame where reality begins. 5, his age when the first computer was built. You can do that math. 1, he helped make the first digital movie. And 10, the number of years he spent researching his new book, which is the basis for today's conversation. He's an Academy Award-winning computer graphics pioneer and co-founder of Pixar and Altamira. He was the first director of computer graphics at Lucasfilm, as well as an original member of the Computer Graphics Lab at New York Institute of Technology. He's the author of this new book, Biography of the Pixel, and a very long-time friend of the museum. We were talking earlier, it dates back to not only when we were first in this building or when we were in our previous building here in the Valley, but back to the original museum in Boston days. A very long-time friend of the museum. Please join me in giving a very warm and special welcome to Dr. Alvy Ray Smith.
Thanks.
I'm glad you're here, Alvy.
Hi.
That's great.
Pleasure to be here. I should sit down.
So here to moderate is an award-winning writer, Barbara Robertson. Barbara was a senior editor at Computer Graphics World for 20 years. She's still writing for them, for that magazine, as well as a freelance writer. She's written for many publications, including Variety, Cinefex, and Animation Magazine. As Alvy's first friendly insider editor for the book, she's just the perfect moderator for tonight's conversation. In this fireside chat, we're really pleased to have you here tonight. Let's give a welcome to Barbara Robertson. Hi, Alvy. Here we are.
Barbara knows me too well.
First, thank you to the Computer History Museum for inviting Alvy and me, and thank you for coming.
Should
we
just
start?
pile in?
I'm going to ask
You're gonna
you.
pile in,
I'm
okay.
going to pile in first.
Okay.
All right. So, as Marguerite mentioned, you introduce in your book the concept digital light. So we have this array of 16 images on the screen. Which ones represent digital light?
Well, just to start with, the whole slide is digital light. Let me just say, digital light is any picture made of pixels. It's a vast, vast, vast domain. In fact, it's so vast that nearly all pictures that exist in the world today are made of pixels and are therefore part of digital light.
Even the cave painting?
Well, the picture of the cave painting. That picture
Yeah.
is made of pixels, so yes.
Yes.
And I guess that's a good way to start about what the pixel is a very profound idea. Everybody thinks it's trivial. In fact, let's start with the gumballs.
Yeah. A lot of people think
Because people think
the gumballs represent.
that people think this is what pixels look like.
Right.
And the very first thing I want to get across is they've never looked like that. They're not little squares. They never have been. You know, it's interesting to me that this has become so embedded in our brains. I think one reason is people think that computers are hard, rigid, linear, mathematical things, and therefore the pictures they make must be hard, rigid, linear, you know,
Right.
pixelated.
Yeah.
No, the computer, and I spend chapter 3 discussing the beauties of computers and computation, is the most malleable tool that humankind has ever invented. It's just nothing standing in its way. It can be as subtle beyond belief. We haven't yet explored its subtleties.
Let's go back to the pixel.
Okay.
So if it's not that square, it's in the gumball machine.
Yeah, what is it?
What is it?
Yeah.
And where did it come from, and who discovered it?
Well, one of the motivations for writing this book was to realize that we are now swimming as a human race in, I estimate, a zetapixel.
A what?
A zetapixel. That's 1 followed by 21 zeros. It's just an unfathomable number, right? It's just, we're awash, you know, in this ocean of pixels, and yet when I ask people what a pixel is, nobody knows. Or they come out with, you know, the gumball idea, or well, if they get close enough together, they become kind of hand wave. And I said,
Right.
actually,
Or if you zoom in, you can see them.
if you zoom in, you can see it.
Right. No.
No, right. So I think one of the other reason that people think that there are pixels there, because every app has a zoom feature. And it's a lie, and it always has been a lie, because this is the way zoom works. If you want to zoom by a factor of 100, say, you repeat each pixel 100 times this way, and each row 100 times that way. In other words, you replace each pixel with a 100 by 100 square array of pixels, and when you display a square array of pixels, well, you see a little square, of course. But that's not a pixel up close, that's a square array that you've drawn.
So what is a pixel?
Yeah, okay, that's where it starts getting tricky.
Yeah,
And the reason people don't know is because it's a little tricky, but if you give me a chance, I'll try to explain it.
The stage is yours.
Oh, okay. So if you imagine a picture being a rumpled sheet, where the height of the rumples are the colored brightnesses of the picture. So you're looking, you know, we look down on the sheet that way to see the picture. And you imagine it falling down on a bed of nails, and each of the nails touches one point on the sheet. And the nails are equally spaced in both dimensions. All right. And then you throw away, you preserve only the value of the sheet, the color value of the sheet that touches each nail.
Okay.
And you throw away everything else
Yeah.
between. All right, now here's the surprising, most beautiful theorem, one of the most beautiful theorems in the world today. It drives everything that you and I are going to talk about, all of digital sound, all of digital light. We call those samples of the sheet pixels. A pixel is a sample on a regular grid of this continuous thing that we call the picture to start with. First thing to notice is the sample exists only at a point. And we all know from high school geometry, you can't see a point. It has 0 dimensions.
Right.
You can't see a pixel. That's the first thing to take away. It doesn't have a shape. All right, it's definitely not gumball shape. And so there is a theorem called the sampling theorem. I hope you're not scared by that word theorem. It just means fact in mathematics. There's this beautiful theorem called the sampling theorem, invented by a guy up there on the screen we can talk about later.
Okay.
That says the following amazing thing. You can throw away the infinity of points on that sheet, that rumpled sheet, and preserve only the discrete points represented by the bed of nails.
Okay.
And not lose anything. Wait a minute. You can throw away an infinity, but not lose it? That's what the theorem says. If you space the nails correctly, which I can come back to what that means later. It appears to be throwing away infinity, but not losing it. And the way it works, and this is the beauty. Let's talk about the spread pixel picture. If you take that kind of a little mountain shape,
Yeah.
and spread each pixel from a point to that shape.
Using that mountain as
Use that mountain as the shape.
Okay.
And you adjust its height, so it's the height of the pixel sample.
Yeah.
And add up the result, you get the original picture back.
You get infinity back?
You get all that infinity back.
That's magic.
It's magic. And it's not an approximation. I think people think pixels are an approximation. No, it's exact if you do it right.
Okay.
It's beautiful. How can it be? Well, somehow, the infinity that you thought you got rid of is carried in that little mountain. In fact, the ideal shape is in the original paper from 1933. 1933. In Russian. Inside the red ellipse, it's called a sink to the mathematicians. I just call it a pixel spreader. It says hump with wheels off to the side. That's the ideal shape. We can't, it's infinitely wide, so we have to use approximations like the little mountain. And so if you have to have a shape of a pixel in your mind, make it the little hump. But actually, pixels have no shape.
So what do we see on screen then? What do you call those little things on screen?
So I have billions of pixels in my cell phone, and I bet you do too. Because that's what we do all day long anymore, is snap. We take pictures, take pixels from the world and save them in files. And you can't see them, right? I can't see them.
Right.
If I want to see a picture made of pixels, I click on the file name, say, and suddenly there's the picture on the screen of my display, on the display of my phone. What has happened there? Are those pixels I'm looking at? No, those aren't pixels. It's another common error. I call them display elements. These little soft glowy things that kind of have that shape of that mountain I just showed you, except it's made of light. And in fact, that is the pixel spreader. The pixels in the file get spread by those little display elements in the little poofs of infinity.
Right.
That add up to be the continuous picture that you see on your screen. No little squares. I didn't say square once, not once.
And that's why the same picture can appear in lots of different...
So
displays,
Pixels
right?
are universal. They're the same to anybody, anywhere, anytime, anywhere on the globe, anywhere in space. You know,
Yeah.
the Mars rovers are sending back pixels. I guess the web is sending back pixels, I guess. And yeah, but display elements, those little glowy things, differ from device to device, from manufacturer to manufacturer, from emitted light to reflected light. I mean, there's all kinds of displays. They're all driven by universal pixels. And that, by the way, that just became true, that we could just share pixels everywhere in the world at about the year 2000, the millennium.
So I'm going to wait. So when did we see the first pixels on screen? The first time we saw that light from a pixel?
Well, I went out to find out when I wrote the book. I said, wait a minute, I should know that. Let me just mention that next month I turned 79. I catch up with Joe Biden. And I was born before computers and Moore's Law and all that. I've seen the whole damn thing unwind. And it's been an astonishing trip. All right. You'd think that somewhere, and computer graphics is my specialty, you'd think I would know where the first pixels were, but I didn't. So I went looking for them, and I have a picture of them. It's,
That's it.
we call it, what's the name of the slide?
First light.
First light. Thank you. First light, please. The picture on the left where it says CRT store, those are the first displayed pixels. In other words, they've been spread so you can see them. 1947, Manchester, England, on the first computer, or actually there's a controversy right now about whether it was the first or the second computer, but let's call it the first just because it's easy.
Yeah.
Named Baby.
Baby. Yeah.
Isn't that wonderful? The first computer was named Baby.
And there was a game.
And that other picture is it's actually the second or third interactive game.
Amazing.
From 1953. So the first pixels, first light I call that picture, was 1947. That game I'm showing you right there was 1953. There was even an earlier one in 1951, both of these in England. And found the first animation on a machine called the Whirlwind at MIT in 1951.
So those engineers were playing games right
They
from
were already
day
doing
one.
games interactively with pixels about 10 years earlier than the received wisdom
Wow.
that I received stated.
So after that, there was just a lot of energy put into this, and a lot of people worked on display technology and on computer technology. How did you, in the book, sort all of that history and untangle it?
Well, one of my shocks when I spent, like I think Marguerite said, I spent 10 years on this book. And the reason it took so long is because every time I looked into a technology, the history of which I thought I knew, I found out it was a pack of lies.
Really?
Not necessarily.
Okay, give me an example.
Well, this kind of goes along with, why didn't I know what the first computer was? Who built the first computer? Well, I finally decided, well, you've got to define it. You've got to define what a computer is before you can say this was first, this was second, this was third. So I did my research and I came up with the result that Alan Turing invented the stored program computer in 1936. There it is, chapter 3. My book explains it in cold detail. Program memory, data memory, programming languages, coding, the whole thing. It happens to be software though, so it's really slow. I guess that's where I could show this. This is a universal Turing machine business card. That business card can compute anything that's computable in the universe.
A bit slowly.
But very slowly. My joke is it could probably do Toy Story, but it might take the lifetime of the universe. And so once I got the definition down, then, okay, so Alan Turing, okay, Alan Turing. That's the name of the slide. Yep. Alan Turing. There he is, the athlete on the left is this genius. I mean, most of the stories, one of my discoveries in this book was that the simple narrative where a creative genius has an idea and everything flows from this one creative genius, it just doesn't work for almost anything in technology anyhow. Alan Turing's almost an exception. Nearly all the computation does flow from him in computers, but not in a straight line. And in fact, in this picture, to his right, inside the circle, is another genius, Johnny von Neumann, who was one of the few people in the world smart enough to know what it was that Alan Turing had proved in 1936. He got it really fast. And if you try to read the papers yourself, to realize that he got it in the night blows your mind. He was really smart. But they both understood that it's so slow, it didn't make any sense. Well, we all know, everybody here knows, I'm sure, if you want something in software to go fast, put it into hardware. So they both of them went out on a mad rush to build the first electronic hardware computers. What we mean by a computer today is an electronic stored program computer. That's what we mean every day by it. And the whole idea of a computer is it makes computation go really fast. That's their purpose.
So once it began going fast, people began thinking about making pictures on it. And you have a picture up there of Ivan Sutherland and Tim Johnson. What was their role with this?
Okay, so in the computer graphics world, there was kind of this history.
This is another one of these
Yeah,
myths,
it's one of these
right?
histories that's just not right, is that Ivan Sutherland wrote this program called Sketchpad at MIT in '63, approximately. And from that, all of computer graphics flowed. It was the first interactive computer graphics. No, it wasn't the first interactive. I've already showed you some interactive games in 1951 up here, 1953. And it turns out when I looked at what Ivan had actually done, he had done only 2D. He had done a 2D program.
Oh, really?
Well, computer graphics is famous for 3D things in perspective. So who did the first 3D interactive program? Well, it turned out to be the other guy up here, whom you might have thought was another picture of Ivan, but it's not. His name is Tim Johnson. He was a classmate of Ivan Sutherland, and he's alive today, but hardly anybody knows his name. He wrote Sketchpad 3, not for version 3, but for the three-dimensional version of Sketchpad, an interactive three-dimensional program. The unfortunate thing for poor Tim is that he looks just like Ivan. In fact, if you go out to the internet, and I've done this, but Ivan Sutherland and look for images, or Ivan Sutherland and Sketchpad, I think is what I entered, and images. I want images of Ivan Sutherland and Sketchpad. It's over 60% in the tests I've run. It's always been over 60% of the pictures are of Tim Johnson and Sketchpad 3,
That's too bad.
not Ivan and Sketchpad. So I'm kind of wanting to boost this guy. He did it. And by the way, there was actually a third picture, they had a third classmate named Larry Roberts. And I cut his picture off, but he was there at the same time as these two guys, and he added perspective to Tim Johnson's program. So Tim Johnson's Sketchpad 3 was not only 3D, but it was in perspective. So I met Larry before he died recently, and I said, well, are you unhappy that the whole computer graphics community has forgotten you? He says, you know, Alvy, I got so famous as being a father of the internet, I just don't care. So I also might point out, since I'm at the Computer History Museum, that Ivan Sutherland and Larry Roberts is not shown, are both fellows here, but Tim Johnson nobody's heard of. Okay. Yeah, it's just another story. These stories, I was amazed how often these kind of stories popped up, yeah.
So at this point, we're still talking about black and white computer graphics.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Once again, I thought I should know where the first color pixels came in, wouldn't I?
The first color pixels came. Where did you think they were?
Well, I thought they were at Super Paint, which is at Xerox PARC. I worked on a program called Super Paint, and with my friend Dick Shelp. My friend Dick Shelp had built this machine, and by the way, it's here in the Computer History Museum. This is this menu, and we had 8 bits of color, 256 colors, 500 by 500.
Right?
Oh, I was so excited when I saw that. I immediately committed to making art on computers for the rest of my life. And I thought, Dick told me I was wrong, but I thought these were the first color pixels in the world. This is early 70s, right here in Palo Alto. And he kept saying, I don't think so, but he couldn't come up with any hard facts. So for the book, I said, okay, I'm going to nail this down. And I went out searching, and I found the first color pixels. The first color pixels, yes, there they are.
How did you find them?
Okay, this is so much fun. By the way, these appeared in 1967, so 6 or 7 years before Super Paint. Okay. So quite a bit earlier than I had guessed. I picked up a book called Expanded Cinema by Gene Youngblood, which is sort of a Bible in the media arts world. And he wrote it in 1970, and he mentioned this new thing called computer graphics, and he even had the word pixel in there, all in capital letters. Really? Didn't quite know what it was yet, but he was looking at, that might be a source of, and he mentioned NASA twice. And I went, gee, is NASA where the color pixels first happened? Short answer is yes. It turned out I found the 2 old engineers who had worked at General Electric, Rod Rougelot and Bob Schumacher, now in their 80s, who had built, this is the simulator for the Apollo Moon project. Wow. But it wasn't there weren't any journals, and this is it wasn't exactly secret, but it was hidden off in these really thick NASA technical memos, and only astronauts got to see these things. So basically the world didn't know about them. So I chased these guys down. Did you talk to them? Yeah. They both live in Salt Lake City now, and I said, can I come down and have lunch with you guys? They said, Alvy, that's not nearly enough time. Come down to Rod's house, and we spent 7.5 delicious hours tearing through moment by moment until we nailed exactly when and where they did the very first color pixel. And not only that, it's the first 3D color rendering of computer graphics, you might note. So, and that's where, well, Don Greenberg comes in for people who know him. So it's easy to go off on tangents here.
So you mentioned Super Paint, and that was when you were involved in this story now from this point forward, right?
Yeah, that's when I had when I left Stanford with my PhD, I took a job at NYU with, it turns out, one of the earliest computer graphics guys in the world named Herb Freeman, another person most people don't know about, who was saved from the Nazis by Albert Einstein, by the way. And he tried to convince me to leave theoretical computer science behind and start doing computer graphics. He knew I was an artist. I grew up painting pictures, oils and acrylics on canvas. It's one of the things I've always done, or had done up until then anyhow. And he thought, well, I was a perfect candidate for computer graphics research. And what I said to him, I'm still kind of embarrassed. I said, Herb, if you ever get color, I'm in. It was all black and white then. I just was bored by it. But at that point, I left to join my buddy Dick. Well, not to join him, he just came out to see his machine that he wanted me to see, Super Paint. And I looked at that and went, oh, there's color, there's painting, that's me. And basically, Pixar came from there.
And so from there, you went to New York.
Yeah, okay, so.
And you were able to work with 24-bit color.
Yeah, so let's put up RGB art. The group now known as Pixar had 3 amazing patriarchs along the way. The first one nobody's ever heard of, Alexander Schur. He had this private university on the North Shore of Long Island called New York Institute of Technology. And we had heard, I should add, I got fired from Xerox. They decided not to do color.
Right.
They called me, I said, well, why? They said, well, we've decided. I said, but you own color completely. I thought, I didn't know about the NASA guy. And they said, you may be right, Alvy, but it's a corporate decision to go black and white. So I went, okay, bye. But I had I had to find the next, we call a memory made of pixels, we call them frame buffers then. And they cost a lot of money. So I had to find the next one. My artist friend David DeFrancisco and I had proposed to the National Endowment for the Arts that we exploit this new artistic medium, raster graphics. Well, that counted on the frame buffer, Dick Shop's frame buffer, Xerox PART had been pulled away. We had to find the next frame buffer. We heard there was this rich man on the North Shore of Long Island that had come through Salt Lake City and bought one of everything that Evans and Sutherland, Ivan Sutherland, were building. And I said, including the frame buffer? Because we knew the next one was being built by Evans and Sutherland. And it would cost $80,000. That's 512 by 512 by 8 bits. $80,000, $1970. Okay. Yes, he did buy one of those. So basically got on the next plane out to New York Tech and David and I talked our way into this place. A madman, he's a wonder, well, read the book, he's quite a story.
So you talked him into buying more.
So,
yes,
he came to me one day and said, are we the best graphics lab in the world? And I said, yeah. He said, well, how do we stay there? And I said, well, if you buy me 2 more of these 8-bit thingies, I can cobble them together. And remember, they're 80K each. Cobble them together into 24-bit pixels, 16 million colors, and then we can do anything. And I tell you the truth, I didn't know whether he got it or not. He was a rather strange man in many ways. Several weeks later, he wanders in, and he said, hey, I got you 5 more of those 8-bit thingies. So you'd have 2 of those 24-bit thingies. And you know, at the time I was a kid, I didn't really know what he had done, but putting this book together, I did all the conversions to today's dollars. And basically, he had just spent $2 million on my say-so and put us out in the lead of everybody else. We had the first RGB color pixels in the world. Those pictures, RGB art pictures, were some of the first, well, they were the first 24-bit artworks. We just went crazy making art. And, you know, I met Ed Catmull there, who would co-found Pixar with me later.
Right.
And Ed and I invented the alpha channel. So you're already seeing RGB with alpha channel in these early works of art. We just went nuts.
So the technology at NYIT, by the time you left there to go to Lucasfilm, everybody went with, guys, you basically had the building blocks you needed to do a CG movie, right? Except for the compute.
We didn't have the speed. There are 2 things that we were missing. We didn't have enough computational horsepower.
Right.
We knew about Moore's law.
Right.
And I'd like to say something about Moore's law later, but we knew if we waited, we would get the speed, and we hadn't solved motion blur. So if you move a still image from frame to frame to animate it without blurring it, it does this.
Right.
It judders across the screen, and it's really unpleasant.
Yeah.
And we knew we had to solve that problem and didn't know how to do it yet. So we had to solve that and get horsepower in order to make, but we had the idea on Long Island that what this team should do would be the first group in the world to make a digital movie, not knowing it was going to take 20 years.
So I'm going to stop you right here and ask you about a tenet in your book called the Central Dogma.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
You sort of hinted at it when you were talking about Ivan and Tim.
Yeah.
And of course, the movie.
So why don't we put up, you've got the Central Dogma slide up. Okay, so basically this started about the time of Tim Johnson and Larry Roberts. They put 3D and graphics and perspective together. And later, but not much later, we added physics to the mix. And if you'll notice the picture on the left, it's called 1984, named for the pool balls. It's completely computer generated. but it's got motion blur in it, it's got mutually reflecting surfaces, it's reflecting the environment, it's got the light sources coming from different directions, it's got texture map. This is the example of what I call the central dogma of computer graphics was finally in place. And by that, it was an unspoken dogma, by the way. We will model the world, the three-dimensional world inside a computer using Euclidean geometry. We will model the motion with Newtonian physics and the lights, the optics with Newtonian physics. And we will push that into 2D using Renaissance perspective. Now, there's nothing about a computer that forces Euclidean geometry, Newtonian physics, or Renaissance perspective. And yet, every modern movie made with computers, there's 3 of them shown in the Toy Story slide, honors the central dogma. The gravity is Earth's gravity, the optics is Newtonian, the geometry is, okay, it's central dogma.
So do you have an image that shows
Non-central dogma?
Yeah, it's non.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of examples of things that don't honor the central dogma. Basically, super paint. The paint programs don't honor central dogma. Basically, you can put any color you want in any pixel.
Yeah.
That's what painting has always meant. And I guess I could refer to the future. Maybe I should save that.
Maybe the hands.
The hands, yeah.
Hands.
Okay, the hands. I drew this picture before I discovered computer graphics while I was a professor at NYU. And I'm very proud of this picture, by the way. It's India ink, rapidograph, templates, all hand stuff. My hands just sketched. It was used as the cover for 38 years for the Foundations of Computer Science Proceedings, which is where all the foundational documents of computer science are published. So I'm very proud of this. But it's not Renaissance perspective. If you look at it, it's a really weird perspective. Straight lines bend. Like I said, there's just nothing there's nothing in the world that says we have to use Renaissance perspective. So that's the real reason it's there, is to introduce the notion of the central dogma.
Right. So in your book, one of the themes that you developed throughout the book was this idea of idea, chaos, benefactor / tyrant.
Yeah.
And I know Fourier sort of set the stage for that in the book, and maybe in your mind, I'm not sure. So,
probably did. I mean, one of my stories, I did several histories in this book.
right.
That's why it took 10 years, a year per technology, basically. And I would often find that, one, the received history is just bogus, and two, that there would seem to be sort of a historiography or something of the history of technology where there was a great idea involved. And some chaos to drive the idea into fruition, and some tyrant or tyranny or benefactor, at least, to get away from pejorative terms, that made it happen, where the benefactor or tyrant usually didn't know that he was doing a good deed. Okay. So Fourier is the guy on the left. The guy on the right is a silly picture of Napoleon Bonaparte. Fourier gave us the theory on which the whole modern world, the sampling theorem, is based. And I bet everybody in this audience knows Fourier theory, but I bet you hardly any of you knows the story of Fourier himself. I didn't,
Right.
And I studied, Ron Bracewell taught me Fourier theory over here at Stanford. He's a fascinating guy. He was a French revolutionary in the French Revolution. He ran up against Robespierre and got thrown into jail, and was about to lose his head to the guillotine when Robespierre lost his head to the guillotine instead, saving our guy, Joseph Fourier's head. I bet you didn't know that. And then he palled around with his new buddy, Napoleon Bonaparte, who took him as a savant to Egypt where he was a member of the group that discovered the Rosetta Stone and so forth. But he also saw all the mistakes, military mistakes that Napoleon made in Egypt. So when Napoleon went back to Paris to take over, the last thing Napoleon wanted was this loudmouth revolutionary Joseph Fourier in Paris telling people what he had really done or not done. So Napoleon's clever thing. So this means Napoleon's tyrant was not Napoleon. Fourier's tyrant was Napoleon. Napoleon made him governor of the province, or prefect, it was called, of the prefecture of where Grenoble's located. Fourier knew he was in exile. He could not go to Paris. He had a posh job, but he knew he was in exile. He could not go to Paris until Napoleon got sent to St. Helena for final exile. Then he comes into Paris, takes over the French Academy, comes up with a greenhouse effect. What a surprise. He came up with the greenhouse effect.
Fourier did?
Yeah, Fourier did, yeah. This is early 1800s. And finished his theory that basically, his theory is that the world is music. That's the way I put it. We all understand that music is a sum of waves of different frequencies and amplitudes played at the same time. And Fourier said, well, not only music, but all sound. And not only sound, but pictures.
So that rumpled bedcloth.
Yeah, that rumpled cloth that I described earlier can be described by a sum of two-dimensional Fourier waves, which you can think of as our corrugations, like a sheet metal building is made out of corrugated steel, where a cross-section is the one-dimensional Fourier wave. You can add those together to get any picture. Well, I guess I left out the part about what's the right sampling rate for the sampling theorem. You've got to sample at twice the highest Fourier frequency. So that rumpled sheet is a sum of Fourier waves of different frequencies. So you find the one in there of the highest frequency, and you take samples, you take pixels in 2 dimensions at twice that frequency. That's the magic sampling rate.
And that's what Kotelnikov?
That's what Kotelnikov. Who's Kotelnikov?
Who's Kotelnikov?
Well, I grew up as a double E because we didn't have this thing called computer science until I came to Stanford. And we were taught that, first of all, the guy named Nyquist at Bell Labs had done the sampling theorem. And then later, when things went digital, we were taught that Claude Shannon proved the sampling theorem. No, he didn't. So I went out thinking, oh, I can write this chapter fast. Claude Shannon, I'll just look up Claude Shannon and write it down. Well, the first thing he discovers, he says right at the beginning of the paper, this is just in the air. In other words, he didn't claim it. He made it formal, and we all learned from his formality, but he didn't do it first. And there's basically a cottage industry out there. Every country has a claimant who did it.
Right.
And I went through all of that and found and satisfy myself that Kotelnikov, this guy, Kotelnikov did it in 1933. And I showed you that Russian paper earlier.
Yeah.
That was his paper, 1933. And I can't read Russian, but I can read the math, and it's exactly the math we use today, including all the subtleties. He did band pass and low pass for those of you who speak sampling theory. Another fascinating character.
Now, who was he had a tyrant?
Oh, did he ever? It was, I guess it's Soviet Russia, really, what it boils down to. But he himself personally, all right, so he lived through the whole Soviet nightmare. He was revolution, the Civil War, both World Wars, the Cold War. So he lived through all of that and made it through. And a lot of people of his stature, for really good scientists, got thrown into the Gulag. Solzhenitsyn told us about this. There were special camps in the Gulag archipelago called sharashkas, meant for the intelligentsia. The basic idea is you're in prison. If you build an H-bomb or solve cryptanalysis, they belong to Mother Russia, and by God, nobody's going to get it because you're in jail.
Right.
All right? So he should have been in jail because all his compatriots were. In fact, his lab, everybody in his lab was in a sharashka. Why wasn't he in a sharashka? Well, because he had a protectress. Mm-hmm. His protectress was a woman named Valeria Golitsova. And the reason she could protect him was because her family was close family friends of Lenin, and her husband was Malenkov, Georgy Malenkov, who was the bloody henchman of Stalin and took over from Stalin when Stalin died.
Right.
That was his protectress, who kept him out of the camp, basically. He ended, everything about this guy is, I had to learn Soviet history, which I knew nothing about. I'm sort of embarrassed how little I knew.
So when we think about a pixel, we can
He's
think about
okay.
this character.
So a Russian communist invented the pixel. How could we give that guy credit,
Yeah,
right?
really.
And you say, well, you can't trust Russian science. You can trust this guy. His mathematical pedigree is perfect. It goes all the way back to Euler. His great-great-great-grandfather or something like that
Really?
was one of the 8 students that Euler had and was a member of the original Russian Academy of Sciences, founded by Peter the Great. Just a line of mathematicians right straight down to Vladimir Kotelnikov.
So and he went on and got involved in the space program, I think.
Yeah, he ran the space program. So he sent pixels back from space. He mapped the polar regions of Venus, for example.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he even came to America once, twice actually. He came to America once and told us they were going to put up this satellite and it was going to broadcast at these 2 frequencies. 2 months later, Sputnik went up and it broadcast at those 2 frequencies. The story goes on and on. I'm not doing it anywhere near the justice, but that's chapter 2.
Okay. So the next person was Turing. And does he fit into this whole idea, chaos tyrant?
I think so.
Yeah.
He was, you know, he was gay and he was hounded by that, by people's fear that if you were gay, you were a spy.
Oh, yeah.
Now, the odd thing was that, by the way, you'll notice that Johnny von Neumann inside the red circle has got a business suit on.
Yeah.
And he's sitting ass backwards on a mule at the edge of the Grand Canyon. I love this picture. His daughter gave me this picture, Marina von Neumann Whitman. No slouch herself. She was the first woman member of the General Motors Board of Directors. Okay. Forgot where I was going to go.
We're doing Turing.
Turing, yeah. So Turing probably got hounded to death. His death is a little mysterious, but it was cyanide poison somehow or another. But the guy who actually slipped the secrets to the Soviets was Klaus Fuchs, who was the cohort of John von Neumann.
Oh, whoa.
Just, no, the story, you guys had it so wrong. Yeah, you had it so wrong. All right.
So that kind of brings us to the myth versus reality, the received history versus the facts. So you've mentioned a couple cases, but you have many.
Yeah, I have lots of cases. In fact, you know, I've already said it, the simple narrative just doesn't work, hardly ever. So I came up with this notion of family trees, right, of all the people. Name me a technology. For example, chapter 5 is about movies.
I was going to ask about movies.
Yeah, okay.
Was that Thomas Edison?
No, it's not Thomas Edison. Who do you think invented movies? Well, I get 3 answers.
Lumiere?
Thomas Edison, the Lumiere brothers, Edward Muybridge. They were involved, but they aren't the guys. They, you know, I had to draw these elaborate family trees, which I won't, they're too complex to step through from here, but they're in the book. Who influenced who stole from who stabbed who in the back. You know, these stories are really nasty, but it all works out, and you can see what ideas came from where and how they all finally came together into what we call the movies. And there's a guy named William Kennedy Laurie Dixon. I'd never heard of him. Well, he's the guy that brought us the 35mm film format that we used for a century with 4 parts per frame. He built Edison's camera for him, and then he went off and started a competing company called Biography that built a projector. In other words, he was one of the first people to build a complete movie system. Wow. You ever heard of him?
No.
In France, you know, I met the curator of the Cinémathèque Française, and he said, "It's what the Lumiere brothers, they hated each other." You know, this nice story, this creation. He said, "That's not true." And I worked it out. It's all in the book. There's a guy over there named Georges Demigny who actually did most of the work that people stole from. So these are, raise a red flag if there's a simple story, you know, one guy did it all. It's
Probably
not going
not.
to be, it's not going to be that way.
So let's talk about Moore's Law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is something I'd really like to get across if I can. I know everybody here knows Moore's Law. It was in 1965, when it is the year I came to Stanford, by the way. And it's also the year I made my first graphic. It's also the year that Gordon Moore announced that he had observed that the density of components on an integrated circuit chip looked like they doubled every, let's say, 18 months or so, right? He said, maybe this will last for 10 years. Well, here it's lasted, how many years has that been? 35 plus 22, 57 years?
I'm not counting.
Yeah, okay, I'm not sure about my arithmetic. Over 50 years, I'm sure, okay. And it's still going. So what is it? Well, I find this formulation of doubling every year and a half as of components on it as non-intuitive. I don't know. It means a lot to chip engineers, but it doesn't mean anything to me.
Right.
So I put it into terms that are equivalent, but I think very much more memorable. Everything good about computers, which by the way happens to be directly related to the density of components on a chip.
Yeah.
Everything good about computers gets an order of magnitude better every 5 years. And an order of magnitude is a factor of 10. Why did I say order of magnitude instead of factor of 10?
Right.
Because we puny humans max out at a factor of 10. We can't imagine what a factor of 10 increase means. I mean, some of us can barely, but generally we're blocked at an order of magnitude change. We have to reconceptualize at a factor of 10. What's Moore's Law say? You're going to get one of those every 5 years. A reconceptualization every 5 years. And sure enough, so if you take Moore's Law factor being 1 in 1965 when he announced it, it's now sitting at over 100 billion, 11 orders of magnitude, and it's still going. And it's going to hit 1 trillion shortly. So right now, everything good about computers, how dense they are, how fast they are, how cheap they are, is 100 billion times better than it was in 1965 when I came to California. We can't think that, because we can only do 1 order of magnitude if we're lucky.
Right.
11 orders made. So people ask me, what's going to be next? I says, you don't know. That's the point of Moore's Law. You can't know. You can know it's going to be bigger numbers, but what it feels like and what you can get out of it, you don't know. We just basically have to get there. And by the way, that applies to the chip engineers too.
They don't know either.
They don't know how to make the chips denser until they get there. Now, I've lived the whole Moore's Law revolution, all 11 orders of magnitude. I've seen the whole thing. The death of Moore's Law has been announced 3 or 4 or 5 times in my life. And the engineers just blow past it every time. I think they're blowing past it again. We were talking about
just a minute ago.
Yeah, I forgot what it's called, but this monster chip that's
just Cerebus.
Yeah.
Cerebus. Yeah.
They blow by engineers once they get to the new plateau, then they can say, oh, now I see how we can take it out another notch.
You have to get there first.
It's just like biological evolution. You can't jump from a bacterium to a baby in 1 step. The evolution took just billions of years of little changes that all accumulated till it finally got there. I often thought, until I realized the meaning of Moore's Law, was why did they, if we knew we were going to double every 18 months, why not just jump to quadruple instead of stopping at the doubling? Well, it doesn't make sense. I mean, you've got to get to the plateau before you can see how to get to the next one, you can see how to get to the next one.
So,
and one more thing, Barbara.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think Moore's Law is a supernova of computational energy. Supernovas is a star that explodes to be brighter, 10 billion times brighter
Yeah.
than the original star. And that number is even small, I think, the Moore's Law explosion. This is an explosion that we barely understand. I've been surfing it my whole life, so have all of you, and we're going to continue apparently for the foreseeable future. Where's it going to go? It's a marvelous, marvelous thing that's happened that drives all of what I've been calling digital light.
So in terms of digital light, when did the two connect?
Well, I think you're talking about what I call the Great Digital Convergence.
I'm sort of getting there, but yeah. But maybe before that, you were beginning to see the impact of Moore's Law, really.
What are you hinting at? Ask it again.
Huh?
Ask it again.
Ask it again. So I guess I'm thinking, we talked about, you could have done the movie. You had the building blocks for making the movie way back when you joined Lucasfilm, right?
Yeah, okay.
You did the Genesis, you did...
Yeah, we did Genesis and Star Trek 2.
Things. But...
It didn't happen. We weren't ready for the movies yet.
You weren't ready for it. So at what point did that happen? Was that Toy Story?
Toy Story was it. Toy Story, which by the way happened right at the millennium, just a few years shy of the millennium. That's why I use the millennium as the year that the great digital convergence happened, when
Right.
all old media types disappeared and coalesced into the one medium of the bit.
You call that the Great
The
Convergence?
great digital convergence.
So say it
It sort
again.
of went by and nobody even paid any attention. It was huge.
Say it again. What is it?
It's when all old media types coalesced into one medium, the bit. So no more film, no more video, no more ink. You know, we still use some of these for display devices, but there is one medium now. You can find the old analog if you go to kindergartens or art museums. I mean, they're around. They're wonderful places to go, by the way. But,
Right.
that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, was I wanted to celebrate the great digital convergence. It happened. It happened unsung. I wanted to sing its praises because it was a huge event. And the movies, the digital, by the way, the book is not about Pixar, even though it's in there. It's not about computer graphics. It's an armature from which to hang the story of all of digital light, which is so much vaster, more vast than computer graphics or digital movies, or there's make versus take I could go into.
Sure.
There's one of the things I wanted to do with the book was organize this vast world of digital light. You know, I'm thinking of the book as a canon of this new field. How do you talk about it? What are the stories? What are the correct stories? How's the technology? The technology is not as hard as it sounds if you obfuscate it with the mathematics. So one of the first distinctions is what I call take versus make. If you hold up your cell phone and take a picture, that's taking. You grab pixel values from the real world.
Right.
Well, there's a lot of that going on. So I call that taking. Image processing is kind of the generic term for that class of pictures.
Right.
Where it's the pixels all come in from the real world somehow. Well, the other half, nominal half, is where you make the pixels. And that's where computers come in. If the idea is if you make a pixel resemble what you could take from the real world, then you can make synthetic pictures.
Right.
Of course, that's where computer graphics comes from.
Right.
So, and then there's all sort of subdivisions of that. There's the computer-aided design world, CAD it's called, where it's really the objects that are of interest, not the pictures.
Right.
Whereas my world is the picture-oriented computer graphics world, where the pictures are important. Not that they're completely separate. You can make models of Buzz Lightyear if you want to, but that's not the main purpose. The main purpose is the movies. Right?
But in order to get them to us, you go through a pixel.
Yeah, and the pixel is the atomic particle of this whole thing that holds it all together.
I like that, the atomic particle. Yeah. Very good. I wanted to ask you, I've been meaning to ask you, I'm kind of actually winding back into the book.
Oh, okay.
You have lots of pictures in the book. Do Did you have trouble finding them? Did you have any good stories about finding them?
Oh boy, do I. Are you sure? Oh, yeah. You know, one of the things, I've never done well, I've done a book before, but they've been more scholarly.
Yeah.
This one, I had 183 pictures.
Whoa.
Well, MIT Press says, well, you've got to get a written agreement for each one of those signed. And if you have to pay for it, you got to pay for it. I do. So just so happened COVID hit right when I needed to get those permissions in place. Kind of, thank goodness, because I wouldn't have allotted nearly enough time for this very slow process of getting in touch with all these people. One of my best stories was, well, I mean, I only got turned down once by, believe it or not, the Walt Disney Company. I wanted to put one of the stories I have in there is that you know, the true creator of Mickey Mouse is of iWorks. He's our hero, not Walt Disney. Walt Disney was his tyrant.
Right.
I mean, tyrant often serves a positive role. I want to be sure that you understand that. Setting up a nice studio and doing all the marketing, but of iWorks invented Mickey Mouse and animated him. Everybody should know that, but they don't. So I want this picture of the two of them side by side. The original name of the company, by the way, was iWorks Disney. They wouldn't give me permission because I called Walt a tyrant.
Oh.
I said, but Pixar, my company, has made you billions of dollars. That didn't matter to those attorneys.
That's a great story. So we have time for some questions.
Okay.
Here's your first one. Who coined the term pixel?
Oh, that's a pretty good question.
That is a good question.
There was a fight for a lot of years about what to call the sample. And there was a battle that I remember, I was even part of it. Should it be PEL? So it's an abbreviation of picture element. That's what everybody finally settled on. But then the battle came down to, should it be PEL or pixel? And everybody at the large corporations like Ma Bell yeah, well, Ma Bell was the big wanted PEL to be the name. Well, all of us upstarts and at places like Stanford and image processing world wanted to use pixel. And basically we just won out, but you know, there was this battle. Okay. But that reminds me that oddly enough, the sound world doesn't have a name for its pixel, for its sample, excuse me. So I had to invent one. It was too awkward not to have a name for it. So I coined this term, I hope you like it, soxel. It's a sonic element, is the name of the sample.
That's cool.
In audio. It's a really handy term.
All right.
In movies, by the way, the sample is called a frame.
Yes. Oh, good point.
Yeah.
What is your favorite memory from your time at the computer graphics division of Lucasfilm? This is coming from someone who knows about the computer graphics.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, we had several patrons along the way. Alex Shure was this crazy man on Long Island. He was number one. Number two was George Lucas. And, well, the whole experience with Lucasfilm was wonderful. I mean, I thought that George Lucas was hiring us so we would make content in his movies.
Right.
No, he didn't really get that. He knew that we could build hardware and software, and he wanted to modernize filmmaking using digital techniques, which is a nice, fine vision. It just doesn't have to be our vision. Our vision was, yeah, we can do that to pay our way, but we want to be in the movies. Yeah. And I just assumed, because I already had a piece in the Museum of Modern Art, and I thought that's surely why they're hiring us. And I kept waiting. I hired these geniuses. Everybody wanted to be in the movies. So Warren Carpenter, Rob Cook, and Tom Porter, and all these guys would just show up. Sure, of course, come aboard. We need you. It was so much fun, you know, kind of being papa to all these geniuses. And waiting for George to show up. He never showed up. I finally realized he didn't get it. And that's when Star Trek II showed, the Paramount showed up with Star Trek 2 needing some computer graphics, not George's Star Wars franchise. And the guys at Industrial Light and Magic said, we don't know how to do that computer graphics stuff. I think the new guys next door, namely us, that's what they do, I think. So they called me over, and long story short, I got the shot. It's just a 60-second shot. We call it the Genesis demo.
Genesis?
Yeah, those are some elements out of the Genesis demo, starring Orrin Carpenter on fractals and Tom Porter on texture mapping, and Tom Duff on bump mapping, and like that. So that was the first time out for the group, now known as Pixar, on the big screen. It was really exciting. It was only 60 seconds, but I said, for some reason I knew that George is always aware of the camera, what the camera's doing. He does. If you try to watch a movie and watch the camera, then the director's failed. You haven't been sucked into the emotion. George, I guess, can do both, because I knew he was aware of the camera at all times. So I told my team, when I assembled them, I said, look, we're going to put a camera shot in here. It won't be gratuitous computer graphics 101, wowie zowie. It'll make perfect narrative sense for the Star Trek people. But George will see that it's an impossible camera move for anything in the real world. So we put this really elaborate camera shot. The camera's whipping around and doing all these fancy moves, following the fire over the limb of a planet, stuff like that. It made narrative sense to the Star Trek people. But sure enough, the day after the premiere, George, who's a little bit shy in my opinion, stepped 1 foot in my office and said, "Great camera move." He got it, and he had us in his next movie just a little bit. And then he told his buddy Steven Spielberg about us, and we were in his next movie. Word spread.
Fantastic. Okay, this is Stump the Speaker.
Stump the Speaker?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, built.
What about the 1921 Bart Lane cable picture transmission by telegraph? Were those pixels?
I don't have any idea what that means. Say it again. Say it again. I mean, there are some things that keep popping up that surprise me. So.
Okay. The 1921 Bart Lane, B-A-R-T-L-A-N-E, cable picture transmission by telegraph.
Okay, I mean, I don't know that particular technology, but I did look into, and I have a section in the book about exactly where is the dividing line between coded. In particular, I was interested in, we've all seen nudes made from typographic symbols on, I mean, this was huge back in the early days. Are those pixels? They're represented by a code.
Right.
And I argue that they aren't, and you can disagree with my definition or not, but at least I have a definition. And I suspect this wouldn't fit my definition either, but it might. I mean, I'm sure it's an intellectual history that it's in there, okay?
Yep. Okay, this is
like what about mosaics or textiles or, I've got examples of those in there say, you know, the idea of breaking it up into little somethings to make a picture is really old.
Right, or the Zen mandalas.
Yeah. Sand. Yeah. So I tried out a set of definitions because that's one of my purposes. Let's nail these things down so we can talk about them intelligently.
Right. Okay, this is a good one. How on earth did you think up the alpha channel? And what was the implementation like?
Yeah, I wished I could claim that Ed and I knew the full profundity of the alpha channel when we invented it, but we didn't. We were just trying to solve a simple problem. Ed was trying to solve a particular hidden surface problem, and he said, Alvy, I have trouble, I have to keep hardwiring a picture into my code so that I can test a foreground object being rendered against it.
Right.
And getting rid of the hidden surfaces. Sure would be handy if we had some way where I could just render against an arbitrary background. So he and I chatted back and forth. I said, well, I think that's real easy. And the reason I could say the following thing is, you'll understand in just a minute, was we just add a fourth channel.
That's what I was going to say. It was
And the
Alex
reason we
Sher.
could, the reason we could do that was because this guy had just bought us, 5 more
Right.
frame buffers. And by the way, he had done 18 more by the time we were here. I said, so we were used to just having lots of memory, a lot more memory than anybody else in the world.
Right.
I said, we'll just add another memory to hold the opacity value, transparency value equivalent. And I had written all the save and restore routines for saving and restoring pictures, and I did it overnight. I came up with this new file format that was RGBA for red, green, blue, alpha. We called it alpha. And Ed rewrote his renderer overnight so that it wrote to one of these new file formats, and it was solved. It was even called alpha.
So did you have any idea at the time how important alpha would be? I mean, this would not be there if there weren't for alpha.
No, I didn't. In fact, it sort of came on me slowly over the years.
Yeah.
The first big advance was 2 of our geniuses at Lucasfilm, Tom Porter and Tom Duff, added an algebra, I'll call it, to alpha channel, which added a level of sophistication to the concept. And then it finally dawned on me some point that with alpha, I'm not going to go into the full details here, but with a certain use of alpha, you didn't have to use rectangles anymore for pictures. We could overthrow the tyranny of the rectangle in pixelated, pictures represented by pixels, not pixelated.
So let's talk about that.
That last one?
Yeah.
The future?
Yeah.
Okay. This is a.
Speaking of
this is
having to have square.
This is a friend of mine named Darcy Garibarg, is an artist. She lives in the Catskills in New York right now. She has been using paint programs for decades. She used my earliest paint programs, and tell you the truth, I didn't much like her stuff. And she and I would argue about, we still fight all the time. Just, kind of fun, but it's fighting. And suddenly, this last year or so, she's changed, she's come up with a new idea. She uses a program called Tilt Brush, which is a 3D VR painting program where you can paint with strokes in 3 space. You put on the goggles and you start painting. You can choose the color, width, texture, and paint strokes in 3 dimensions all around you. You can sculpt, basically. And these honor the Central Dogma. They cast shadows on one another. They can be transparent. And so the hidden surfaces, all of that, it's all there. It's in perspective and so forth. Then she takes the tilt brush sculpture, for lack of a better word, and looks through it at her studio or her kitchen or some room in her house or something, which becomes a take kind of picture. But then she brings all of that into Photoshop and does artistic things to it. And the results are, to me, really exciting. I feel like I'm being sucked in by the 3D-ness of the virtual part into her paintings, which all of a sudden I really like. And she's starting to get shown all around the world. So it's I'm just using that. Well, look, that's last year. I guess this is a good point where I should just say, I think we're on the verge of an astonishing explosion in art, in making art with computers. I think it's already underway. I think, Darcy's is a good example of the beginnings of that. Watching these, I gave a talk the other night at a house that was full of artists who were making art with AI. So there's that whole AI dimension that we just none of us really understand yet, but it's about to explode out. It's already exploding. There's a generative art. It's just exploding. And I'm just sitting here holding on, wondering where it's going to go. And I'm encouraging artists of the world, please break out of the Central Dogma and show us what else is out there. There's an infinity of possibilities out there, artistic infinity. Show us. And I'm just sort of saying, okay, I'm 79. How long can I last? how much of this can I see? Because I know it's just going to rip into the future starting now for another, driven by Moore's law. So it's going to be big.
So do you have a last word of advice for us?
Is that when I use my word?
It is. It is.
My word is numinous. And this is a little hard to describe, but actually my instruction is seek the numinous. And by numinous, I mean that special, God, it's hard to describe. It's that feeling you get when you stand on the edge of the Grand Canyon and look into it, or you stand under the redwood trees, or in my case, in my wife's case, one of the places we felt numinous together, which is important to our relationship, was in the White Sands. I grew up in New Mexico. I don't know whether you've ever seen the White Sands, but you drive into the White Sands and suddenly the entire world becomes white. The highway, the ground, the dunes, everything but the sky, which is piercingly blue. And if you don't go into a state, I don't know what's wrong with you. That's the numinous. It's my form of religion, I guess is one way to put it. And there are a lot of different ways to seek the numinous, and I encourage you to do that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Well, don't get up. You have to join me again in thanking Barbara for such a wonderfully moderated conversation.
I thank
And Alvy Ray for bringing some light into the room. Very, very special. I said up front that CHM is focusing its mission on decoding technology. And if this wasn't a decoding conversation, I don't know what was. I hope you've all learned something tonight, and you'll use the QR code on the program to offer up the insights and the learnings that you've taken away. This is fundamental to our mission and purpose, so please take the time to do that on top of joining me a little bit later downstairs with Alvy Ray. There will be a book signing opportunity as well, so thank you for that. I would also like to say that this is also an opportunity for me to maybe make a comment on a personal level. I worked at Apple a long time ago, and there was an argument about square pixels and rectangular pixels. Some of you may actually know that. And guess what? We just really learned that there's no such thing. which I just love, and that's one of the joys of reading the book, so I'd encourage you to do so if you haven't already. It's absolutely stunning to appreciate pioneers who come to the table and put their life's work in the context of so much historical relevance. It's very, very true that history is not about the past, it's about the present having a conversation with the past. And the work that you did over a 10-year period just shines so much light on so many things that are ever present in our life today. And the fact that we're focused on tech and creativity, I want to say this was the most creative conversation I've heard in years, personally. And in the last 7 days here at the museum, we're commenting earlier in the evening as we were preparing, we accepted a new wafer scale compute engine into our archive and our inventory of assets. And it's a 9-inch square wafer that has 2.6 trillion transistors on it and 850,000 cores that are optimized for graphics-based compute. So the things that we have no idea about have yet to come. So thank you for what you've done, and that we'll all see in the years to come. So thank you both so much, and we'll see you downstairs. Great.
Can I say something?
Thank you very much.
Before you, yeah.